You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Branford Board of Finance for November 25th, 2024. And first on the agenda is to have a moment of silence to acknowledge the passing of board member Victor Casella. As we know, Victor was a great person. He passed away on Friday, October 11th, at the age of 80. Victor was a longtime Branford resident, and my recollection is he started his involvement with the town as an assistant treasurer back in the early 1980s. He served on the Democratic Town Committee, the RTM, was involved with the Branford Community Foundation, was a member of the Connecticut National Guard here in Branford, and was on the Board of Finance with us since 1998. Our condolences to his wife Marilyn and his sister Marie and family, his sons Matt and Paul, and their wives and children and grandchildren. So with that, I ask the board for a moment of silence. Thank you. He will be missed. Okay, next on the agenda is to approve the minutes of September 30th, 2024 meeting. And Lisa informed us they're not available tonight, so we'll defer that with a table it to the next meeting. Okay, motion to table.
Motion. Eric. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 3 on the agenda is citizens communication. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to comment on tonight's agenda, they're welcome to do so at this time. Okay, no takers on that. We'll go to item number 4 to hear a presentation by GYL's financial synergies with regards to the performance of the town of Branford's pension fund. The quarter ended September 2024, and if necessary, rebalance the portfolio, along with the OPEB Trust, the Volunteer Fire, and the Coastal Resiliency Fund. Welcome, Michael, and we understand that you're under new leadership now?
Yes, so good evening all. I'll start off by saying we have had a change to our corporate structure. As the Board of Finance is well aware, back in 2016, our team, if you will, that had worked together since the late 1990s, had formed our own registered investment advisory firm. We were one of the, I think we were the 43rd partner firm within the Focus Financial Partnership. Fast forward 8 years, and we're memorializing, if you will, we're taking the next step in our relationship with Focus, and that is we're becoming a fully integrated part within the Focus enterprise, and that was finalized or closed on November 1st when GYL joined with the Colony Group based out of Boston. We will be undergoing a name change probably in the first quarter of next year to Focus Partners for the broader institution. However, as it relates to the town of Branford and the various pools of assets that we have had the privilege to consulting to for the past 2 decades almost, there will be no change to what the town of Branford and the Board of Finance see. The contracts were assigned, the fiduciary oversight and responsibility, as well as the fee structure, are intact, and you'll continue to see me on a quarterly basis, continue to be supported by our folks out of West Hartford.
Thank you. Questions?
Okay, great. So thank you. So this evening we'll do a brief economic update. I'm trying to make the acronyms a little bit shorter in light of some of the feedback I've received, and so we went with CHIVE this quarter, starting with the C for the consumer, following H for housing, then I for inflation, of course, V for volatility, And in the E, which of course has changed in the past 3 weeks. At the beginning of the quarter, it was elections, and now we've since that's sort of ancient history at this point, we've moved on to a broader E for economy. The consumer continues to be reasonably strong, and in fact, in October, we saw consumer confidence upticked. It was the largest increase since March of 2021. So that's important because in a lot of ways, as goes the consumer, so goes the economy, with consumer spending accounting for about 2/3 of our economic activity. In terms of raw numbers, there's different metrics for consumer confidence, but the one that's kind of noteworthy is the expectation, or consumer expectations. And the actual number is at an 89.1. That's significant because it's generally thought of that a number at 80 or below is indicative that we're headed towards recessionary territory, so we're comfortably above that. Consumer debt service remains manageable, although we've seen the headlines about the $1 trillion in credit card debt and what have you in terms of the size of consumer balance sheets. Debt service is at about 10% of income, which by historic standards is manageable and is about 25% lower than it was, just for some comparison, prior to the financial crisis. What's a little more concerning on the consumer side is that consumer savings rate have come down. We're as high as about 6.5% of income in the latter part of the 2010s. We're down to about 5% now. Still about twice what it was leading up to the financial crisis, but that has been trending down, so it's something to keep an eye on. As far as housing is concerned, we know that we have a housing shortage, and that in all likelihood will continue as there is certainly a supply-demand imbalance because of the dramatic shift in mortgage rates. Folks that still have a mortgage, or in addition to the costs associated with moving, of course, mortgage rates for many people would be a doubling of many people's mortgage rates, and so consequently that's less supply in the market. Add to that the fact that there are a fair number of cash buyers still out there, and those that can afford to pay cash basically come in and give strong bids, so it's been very challenging. That will in all likelihood continue, and in fact, if we look at the most recent housing inflation numbers, we're still almost at 5%. So although the headline inflation number has come down, housing inflation is still somewhat elevated nationwide. And that gets us to the I in our acronym. The headline inflation rate is down to 2.6%, but that is somewhat belies the underlying inflation. We've seen a significant decline in the price of energy in particular, and we've seen a significant decline in the inflation rate for goods. Actually, we've seen in some areas a little bit of actual deflation for goods. However, housing, services, as well as insurance, in particular auto insurance, remain very elevated. And so in a lot of ways, depending upon what you're spending money on, you may really still be feeling the pinch of inflation and rising prices. And of course, for all of us, prices are still, economy-wide, about 25% higher than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. The V is for volatility. I'll say we've certainly seen tremendous volatility, and in all likelihood will continue to, both as a function of just the general market environment as well as computerized trading, which tends to, in a lot of ways, make decisions and then ask questions later on. So we anticipate, especially with a new incoming administration and what are likely to be a fair amount of policy changes, there certainly will be added volatility and headline risk. But lastly, we get to the economy, and the economy, of course, is really what drives the long term. We hear lots of short-term noise, but in the long run, the economy continues to do reasonably well. We finished the second quarter at a 3% growth rate. The first read on the third quarter was at 2.8%. So again, this talk of this inflation that everyone, or recession rather, than folks have been waiting years for, it still appears to be somewhat on the distant horizon. Unemployment has crept up a little bit, but it's still by historic standards quite low at about 4.1%, and we are seeing labor participation rate improve as well. So big picture, the consumer is reasonably strong, the economy is doing reasonably well, but we do anticipate added volatility, and we have to kind of keep a close eye on the potential thunderclouds on the horizon. But as it stands now, things are looking reasonably stable for economic growth. With that, I will dig into the performance. We'll start with the police pension. and that is in tab 2 of your booklet. And we can start on page 23 of tab 2, and we'll take a look at the 35,000-foot view, starting with a couple of the numbers that we look at every quarter, and that, of course, is the volatility quotient, or the beta, which is a measure of volatility. That has come in at about 7% less than that of the underlying benchmark, going back to inception. That's at 0.93. That has come with a slight amount of excess return on a risk-adjusted basis, and so consequently our alpha figure is a positive number as well at 0.03. In dollars and cents, what that translates to is at the bottom right. We began on 4/1/03 with $8.31 million. Since that time, there have been negative net cash flows to the tune of minus $391,000, and in earnings in the amount of $24,376,000. That brings us to an ending value of $32.3 million at the end of September. So turning back a couple of pages to page 20, since the pension plan is invested passively on the equity side and actively on the fixed income side, our exposure and our performance substantially similar to what we would expect. For the most recent quarter, the return was 6.38%, a couple ticks behind the benchmark, which was at 6.8%. That's owing to a relative overweight in cash during a rising market. And we can see for the trailing 1 year, really pretty amazing equity-like returns, or really well above equity-like returns for both stocks and bonds. And the average return for the portfolio for the trailing 1 year came in at 19.3%. The equities returned 29.25%, and fixed income, amazingly enough, returned 11.3%. Fixed income benefited not only from rates starting to come back down, but also from the Board of Finance's decision to lengthen the duration of the bond portfolio when rates came up, and that created a little bit of a tailwind. We do have a little slippage in the high yield, although having returned 12.5% for the trailing 1 year and 4% for the latest quarter, very good absolute returns. And our high yield, or our lower quality bonds, continue to be invested more conservatively than that of the benchmark. So we would expect over time that they would underperform the benchmark on an absolute basis, although on a risk-adjusted basis, performing consistent with expectations. You all have 4 handouts in front of you. The first is for the police pension. And this is what we affectionately refer to as a rebalancing spreadsheet. Since the end of the quarter, or really since the beginning of November, we've had a fair amount of volatility in the markets. Right after the presidential election, I'm sure everyone's well aware that the equity markets really ran up dramatically, although at the same time there was some concern that inflation may sort of return, if you will, and we saw bond yields move up as well. Now, there's kind of conflicting opinions on that. Some folks think that new policies may be inflationary. Others in the bond market are taking the view that they're pro-growth, and so that's why yields have moved up. But regardless, yields moved up dramatically immediately after the presidential election. They've since come down somewhat, but they are, still higher than they were over the summer. The net result of that is that we see that we're overweight in equities and underweight in fixed income. If you focus in on the gray shaded areas on the spreadsheet in front of you, you can see fixed income, we're currently at 50% of assets versus our target at 52% of assets. Equities, we're at 47.5% versus 45% in target, and then cash, a little bit under target at 2.6% versus 3%. So the recommendation for this evening, as always, I reviewed this with the finance director ahead of the meeting, but the recommendation for this evening is, even though we're well within the parameters to not rebalance because of the volatility we've seen in the market and because of sort of the conservative nature of the Board of Finance and the liability matching of the pension, we are going to recommend essentially capturing those gains from the equities, buying into new fixed income at relatively elevated yields, and so consequently we recommend or request a full rebalancing of the portfolio this evening.
Okay, questions?
Question. Can you go back to page 5, which ties into everything we're doing?
Sure.
comments regarding not Russell and Standard and Poor's and the, what are you thinking about regarding financials and healthcare for 25?
Well, I mean, in general,
Yeah.
financials and healthcare are very often difficult areas of the market. I think the consensus is now, especially with the new administration coming into place, that the regulatory environment will be somewhat less constrictive. And so that should, in particular, be beneficial for financials. As far as healthcare, it's really tough. We're in a, certainly the demographics are very beneficial for healthcare as an industry. However, there continues to be a tremendous amount of pressure, both from the government as well as for the public,
How to pay for
particularly with pricing. Excuse me?
It's how to pay for them.
It's how to pay for them. That's exactly right. It's eloquently and simply put. And so we're reasonably positive on financials as far as healthcare. You could make the argument one way or the other, just like you could make the argument pro or anti-inflation. In a lot of ways, we'll have to sort of see how things play out. But healthcare represents, not an enormous part of the underlying benchmark. Of course, in a lot of ways, technology is a big driver, and I think I believe financials are the second largest sector. But healthcare is formidable, but I don't envision it having a tremendous impact.
Okay, second part of the question is
Yes, sir.
to the right of the page, the international equities. And I don't expect you to be an international guru, but what are you looking at with these countries? I guess we'll have to wait out the one on the bottom, Russia.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait out.
It's all in the red.
We'll have to wait out the one on the bottom, and we'll also kind of have to wait out the third from the top, China, in a lot of ways. I think the others, the international markets in a lot of ways are arguably inexpensive, certainly compared to the U.S., and there can be a strong argument made for reversion to the mean. We've had a very, very long stretch where U.S. has outperformed non-U.S., and at some point that will probably turn, although by historic standards we would have thought it would have already. The flip side to that, of course, is America continues to be the leader in terms of this is where people want to come. This is where our R&D is kind of second to none, our technological development, et cetera. And so that's these are all positives for the U.S., but from a evaluation standpoint, the U.S. is a little bit rich, but there has been and continues to be significant momentum, and certainly, regardless of what your feelings are about the results of the election, we're definitely, moving into an administration that is very pro-growth. Now, whether that, kind of goes overboard and creates inflation, we'll kind of have to wait and see, but that's certainly the trend. So we continue to like being a bit overweight in the U.S., but there's, international will have its day. And it's arguably past due.
Yeah, do you think that India is going to continue making those good returns?
I mean, whether or not we'll have a 40% up year in 1 year, who knows? Of course, we could have said the same thing about the S&P in a lot of ways. But India is, in Asia in general, and I'll lump India together with Asia, that's where we're getting the population growth, that's where we're getting the economic growth. And arguably, whether you're pro or con on China, its population growth is its best days are behind it, and so in a lot of ways, Southern Asia and India are really going to be the main drivers. And so I wouldn't bet against India. However, I would also say, remember, it's an emerging market, as we saw with some of the fraud issues with with its wealthiest citizen in the past week or so. There are always risks associated with the emerging markets, and that's why we tend to keep a relatively modest allocation there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to rebalance as proposed by Michael and after discussion with Jim Finch on this.
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved. Second, Harry. Discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you. So now if we could please move to tab 3, we'll briefly review the OPEB. Tab 3 on page 43. Again, we'll look at the 35,000-foot view. Historically, we've had less volatility in the OPEB, and that is owed primarily to the significant cash flows, and in particular until bond yields spiked up, and we invested a lot of that cash in fixed income a year or so ago. We were overweight in cash, and so consequently the volatility a little bit less than that of the pension at 0.87 or 13% less than the benchmark, and so our alpha or value added slightly higher at 0.05. In terms of dollars and cents, going back to the first full month of investments, we were at $4 million on 7/1 of 2011. Since that time, $24 million in net contributions and just under $13.9 million in earnings, bringing us to an ending value of $41,986,000. In terms of relative performance, just to refresh everyone's memory and for the public as well, we made a decision a year or so ago to immunize the bond liabilities. Approximately 25 years of liabilities are duration matched for the OPEB, and so consequently we have a relatively high allocation. We're about 70% in fixed income in total. Why is that, and why is the OPEB so much more conservatively invested than the pension? Well, not the least of which is because you're so well funded. I think last we're about 140% or so funded. Aside from that being a phenomenal number, just kind of anything 140% funded. If you look at a lot of your peers around the state, Branford continues to be at or near the top of your peer group, and even the most recent numbers, about half of the municipalities in the state don't have any money set aside for OPEB at this point, and the number that's fully funded is a handful at best. So this is really, Branford's kind of unique in this space in that not only are you extremely well funded, but your liability matching for several decades worth of liabilities. So what is a major liability for a lot of municipalities, Branford has really in a lot of ways dealt with it well ahead of the curve. In terms of rebalancing, this is the second sheet. As I alluded to, the only one that we're going to recommend action on tonight is the police pension, which you've already approved. But just for information's sake, you can see we're slightly overweight on fixed income, but really spot on with the policy at 68.3% of assets versus 68% for policy, and slightly underweight on equities at 31.7 versus 32%. So no recommendation to rebalance the OPEB portfolio this evening.
Questions?
Great. So moving on to the next tab, volunteer fire. In the interest of time, I'll go through that. That's tab 4, page 62. I'll go through this quite quickly because it's substantially similar to the police pension. Again, you can see the beta or the volatility quotient at 0.93 and a slightly positive alpha number. That dates back to 2015 when the fire plan was broken away from the police plan, and just going back a couple of pages, you can see again we continue to see strong returns across the board. 6% for the third quarter, just under 20.5% for the trailing 1 year, and the only difference really here between the fire plan and the police pension is that because of the relatively small dollars in the fire plan, we use a Vanguard bond index for the bonds rather than a customized fixed income portfolio. Similarly, on the spreadsheet that you have, you're really quite close to the policy. We're about 41.8% bonds versus a policy of 42.5%. 55.8% stock versus a policy of 55%, and we're spot on with cash. So no recommendation to rebalance the fire pension this evening.
Thanks, Mike. Questions?
Yes, okay. So lastly, we'll go to tab 5, which is the Coastal Resiliency Fund. Because of the relatively heavy allocation to fixed income in this asset pool, created some initial volatility when rates spiked up shortly after this was funded in 2022, although we have seen a nice recovery since that time. On page 75, we can see again somewhat less volatility than that of the benchmark, about 11% less is indicated by that beta statistic, and then positive value added with the alpha of 0.06. In dollars and cents, total contributions of $1,925,000, or excuse me, initial contribution, and then additional contributions of $831,000 and earnings of $264,000, bringing us to $3,020,000 at the end of September. That translates to a 3-month return of about 4.84% and a 1-year return of just a tick over 15% for the Coastal Resiliency Fund. Similarly, you have an update in front of you, and as of last night, or as of Friday's close, should I say, we were underweight in bonds by just under 1% at 64.1 versus a target of 65, and a similar slight overweight to equities, but we're really tight there, and so in terms of dollar amounts, we don't think it makes sense to rebalance the portfolio, and no recommendation as such.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Questions on this or other presentation?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy
Take care.
Thanksgiving, all.
Mike,
Thank you.
Next up is item number 8, which is to consider and if appropriate approve a closeout transfer request from the Director of Public Works for 2024 as follows: from regular wages and salaries, $17,566, transferring into overtime, $7,180, and accumulated sick, $10,386. Welcome, Gary.
Yes. We had, as far as our overtime budget went, we had 2 retirements and some employee turnover that happened last year, and in order to stay on schedule with our projects, our paving projects, the drainage and stuff, needed to use some overtime. So that is the reason for the overtime transfer. The other one was the accumulated sick, $10,386. That's under the collective bargaining agreement. Retired employees were entitled to being paid out of unused accumulated sick time, sick leave up to 40 days, and that $10,386 reflects that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Questions from the...
yeah, Gary, are you currently staffed up? Are you,
At the
your
moment, we
positions
are.
filled?
At the moment, we
At the
are.
moment?
But it's always changing.
Are you ready for the first snowstorm?
Yeah, we always are.
Okay.
We're ready for anything.
Any other questions?
We're ready for Christmas.
Okay.
I'll move it.
Moved by
second.
Jeff, seconded by
Pam.
Pam. Questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All set, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice Thanksgiving. Next is to review and consider requests from the Finance Director and First Selectmen to commence the closeout of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding. Jim has prepared a good comprehensive memo. Jim, would you like to present this, you and Jamie?
Sure. One thing you'll notice when you read through it, there's a lot of various departments. It's not just the finance director and the first selectman, but the reason we bundled the request this way is to kind of present this in a somewhat orderly fashion as opposed to having different departments coming at once. Certainly departments were invited to come to the meeting, and I expect on some of the items they will probably be presenting on these items. It's hard to believe that we're winding down ARPA. We first started our appropriations in 21-22. The town received $8,257,021, and so the first thing that the memo addresses is to appropriate the balance of that. The second thing we're going to talk about is transferring existing ARPA balances to create new projects. And then the last thing would be to talk about a process to allocate expenses to meet some of the ARPA deadlines. And so when we start with the projects from the unappropriated ARPA funds, you have Willoughby Wallace Library, 4,000.
No, the library closes at 8.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, the library closes at 8, so maybe we'll,
A little bit later.
we may savor a trip here, but, so basically, there's an explanation there. I probably don't need to read all of it, but essentially the library was operating under kind of a hybrid model between the town's IT and libraries online, and so they're leveraging the current dues to try to get some upgrades. I mean, in the future, the town will have to provide some additional computers as well, and so and also upgrading the phone system. So it's a small amount, $4,370. It is a new project. The library, up until this point, did not have any projects in the ARPA fund. And you can see in the second paragraph, I give you some of the detail in hardware licensing and the phone system. No, actually, Jennifer Sullivan, the library director, is just coming in. So, yeah, Jennifer, I was just going over your request.
Oh,
And
excited.
so, and I was explaining how it has the hardware licensing and replacing the phone system.
Yes.
I didn't get into any of the operational efficiencies, but if you want to take over from here, you're more than welcome to. So.
Okay, so, wait, so you explained the
You
numbers?
wrote a request for the 4370.
Yes, exactly.
So if you just want to add any detail, that would be helpful.
I think, like I said, it would help with efficiency for the department. Currently, when we have issues with town IT, we have to ask them to come in, and then they have to coordinate with Lion IT for a lot of our interlibrary operations. So switching to this proposed model would allow for us to get work done faster, not to have to ask for 2 IT departments to coordinate, to have to talk with outside vendors about things like API security for our databases and things like that.
So this would all be managed by Lion?
Yes.
Okay. And so what involvement with local IT, Branford IT have?
None, but
Even on the phone system?
no, they've asked that we do our own
Okay.
also.
Who's asked, IT?
The town's IT, yeah.
Yeah, Joe, just so you know, at some point we will have to add some PCs to this.
Right.
But in
Okay.
terms of managing
As
it,
far
it'll be
as
Lion.
help desk and other
No, the Lion system can
this
take
is
care of that 100%.
full service,
Yeah.
I got you.
Yes.
And this will be added, this will be an ongoing expense?
Not the 4370, no.
Just the support?
Just the support, but that's already added into our yearly fee that we pay to Lion already.
Okay,
So, yeah, it's pretty
very good.
straightforward.
Questions from the board on this? Okay, I think,
I'll move it.
do you want to move these individually, or we're going to move these
Yeah, probably individually is probably better.
individually?
Yeah.
Okay, Harry moved it,
Second it.
seconded by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, you're all set, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. I know.
Next up is
Yeah, next up is Blocka, and I believe there's some representatives here. A letter was distributed this afternoon outlining the Blocka request.
Blocka?
Yes.
Okay, Jim, you want to provide the overview?
Sure. Basically, the first selectman was approached by Baca recently looking for some dollars, and essentially, I think think the way the town processed this, quite honestly, was, they didn't want to make the same commitment they did previously. You may recall, $70,000 was approved for this. I think there was an expectation, which I think this request as funded reflects an aspect of that, and that is that, the town's contribution would eventually start to taper. And so this piece here, the $35,000, is half of what was originally requested. I think there's an overall sense that, the Baca Gallery does add a lot to the downtown, and it does bring visitors in there. And I think that, it in many ways is seen as an element of economic development as well. And what, Jamie, you want to?
I think that's how we approached it. As board recall, Baca was one of our, funded the organization a couple of years ago. They've established a quite large gallery in the center of town, which has, and I think at that point, Jerry is here to speak to it, and Robin, they could speak more in depth regarding the impact regarding it. But as Jim said, we kind of couch this under economic development, and anecdotally, from what we've heard, that there is impact that it is having on our center, our downtown, and we're bringing people to Branford and supporting other businesses from there. So now, as I said, Jim mentioned, I was approached by Baca about additional support, and Jerry has provided a letter and is here to answer any questions and talk about the organization.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, well, you all received the letter that Jerry Casanova put together. Anything you'd like to add, Jerry?
No, I would just say, Baca as an organization is 10 years old. The gallery is about 3.5 years old. Baca really didn't have much of a presence until there was a gallery. And it is a store, and it looks like a store, but it's actually more than that, because part of our mission is very much community service, bringing the arts and artists together in a variety of ways. So we are almost self-funded through our sale of artwork and other revenue-generating channels, but we are in a growth mode right now, and the funds that we're seeking from the ARPA pool would go to things that will enable us to invest in more marketing, some technology, areas that will help us to be self-sustained.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board?
Question?
Eric?
What's your long-term plan just for example, for discussion, to replace the money if we approve what we're giving you tonight? Because that well is going to be dried out.
We had a very strong fundraising year. We raised almost $80,000, much more than the year before. We've invested in donor management technology that is helping us to be more efficient and more effective in our outreach. In the coming year, we will do more to develop corporate sponsor relationships. So we are broadening our sources of revenue, and our sales of artwork in the gallery are very strong.
One thing I'd like to add, that like most organizations in the beginning, a lot of our funding came from events or one-time donations. With the funding that we hope to get tonight, we're going to develop a much more stronger benefactor database where we can locate patrons who would be supporting us on an annual basis as opposed to the one type of donations that we've been accustomed to. It seems that historically art organizations like us start that way with the one-time donations and the events. But once you build a track record and have credibility, and I think we all have to agree that Baca does, I mean, since we opened that storefront, there's less service-orientated businesses in the center of town. We have much more retail than we did before, and I think it's all because of the destination that Baca has created on Main Street that wasn't there before. And so that's our goal. With this funding, if we get it, we'll be able to develop that benefactor relationships that's so important to any organization like ours.
Thank you, Robin.
When you talk about the marketing expenses, do you have a vendor that you're using, or how, I mean, is that the bulk of where, other than the overhead, how much are you spending like on the marketing to get the word out? I noticed in your letter you mentioned.
We generate quite a bit of publicity, first of all, which comes from within. I mean, that's like really cost efficient. We did not advertise in Connecticut Magazine as we did a year ago. And it's something we would do next year. We do a fair amount of online content marketing. So we have a newsletter, we do email marketing. One area that we are looking to invest in next year, or certainly explored in a serious way, is to have an online gallery, which opens up, a whole new revenue stream for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a high cost of entry, and we have the artists and the artwork and the enthusiasm of artists to sell online. And we have artists who are doing very, very well selling their work online. So that would be a revenue source for us as well.
So would they be interested in, turning over 25% to advertise their art on your platform? Is that?
Or a commercial platform that is specific for galleries,
Okay.
Saatchi Art. There are a number of them. So you pretty much use the platform, but you direct in all of the transaction it would be through our website.
And if I could just jump in, part of our income stream is that we have wall rentals, and we also get a commission structure from art that's sold within the gallery or online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is, 25%.
It's a 25% commission, which is very reasonable. It's quite a bit less than galleries closer to New York.
Yeah, and part of our difficulty has been that money is somewhat tight, and to develop a marketing program, you need a source of funds if you wanted to work with people who know what they're doing. I mean, our board is made up of very talented individuals, but I don't know if any of us are marketeurs. And it's a science, it's an art combined, and those people aren't necessarily, well, certainly we can get them at a discount, but many of the real professionals aren't going to donate their time without some type of compensation.
Right. Okay.
I got a couple questions.
Sure, Jeff.
What are the hours of the gallery?
We have our gallery director back here. Mary, what do we...
We are open Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5.
And we're also...
Evenings when we have events.
Yeah, we also have events once or twice a month, and we're open until 8 o'clock any given evening. Actually, we're having an event at the old post office on the 14th to raise money in a holiday market event. We had an event Thursday night that showcased all the Christmas trees, and if you guys haven't been down there, I urge you to see how beautiful the gallery looks with, how many Christmas trees, Mary?
37.
27 decorated.
37.
37 trees that have been decorated by artists and businesses throughout the town. It's magnificent.
And that is it's a fundraising endeavor. So is it 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
December 8th.
Yeah.
Fitting us.
Great.
Yeah.
Jerry, one last question. Do you guys do your social media in-house, or is it something?
We do currently, but I would look with the benefit of the funding, here to have a freelancer. We need to go deeper into our use of social media.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just content, it's all the analytics, and we're just at that stage. We're ready to move to 3.0.
Thank you.
We're good at what we do, and we're discovering what we're not good at. And that's what this funding will help us deal with, those things that we need professionals to give us guidance and direction.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Somebody like to move this?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
seconded by
Deborah.
Deborah. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all.
Have a nice holiday, everybody.
Good luck, thank you. Next is IT, purchase $7,500 for purchase of laptops and related equipment.
Yep. And basically, that it's pretty self-explanatory. And I think it's probably important to underscore, too, that, you know, this whole collection of items that we're creating these new projects are items that we feel that we can move the dollars out the door by December 31st. And so, you know, with information technology, those are things that we can certainly order. Some of the additional laptops, for example, will come in handy because, you know, we've had a lot of turnover of employees. And, you know, when Catherine tries to do training for like some of the entry-level positions on the financial system, it's easier to do it when everybody's doing it at the same time. So the laptops can also be used as for training as well. And so that was $7,500 for the laptop.
Questions on the IT, $7,500? Somebody want to move? Moved by Jeff.
Second.
Seconded by Harry. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, GGB, $15,000. Supplement repair and maintenance account to cover the cost of painting inside and outside of Town Hall.
Yep. So that's something that...
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
What color?
That's gray and white on the outside.
Right on the outside.
Okay. Questions from the first selectman on this one?
Looks good. I'll move it.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
seconded by Pam. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Executive, we gotta look at this one.
Yeah.
$9,651. This request will use to replace furniture in Town Hall.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Straightforward. Somebody want to, any questions from the board?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second. Deborah.
second by Deborah. Pam, you have any questions?
No,
Okay.
just a funny number.
Yep. And then by basically allocating this 71,000 and change, that fully uses up the unappropriated ARPA balances, and so there is a resolution on the next page.
Okay, so first we'll vote on this 9651, I think, right, because we're doing it individually. Motion is made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And then here is Jim's resolution. Resolve the Board of Finance recommends the RTM an increase in the cumulative ARPA fund appropriation from $8,185,500 to $8,257,021. This appropriation will fund a variety of projects to close out the fund.
Move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
second by Harry. Discussion. All in favor? Okay, so next, these are internal within ARPA fund transfers.
These are within existing ARPA appropriations to create new projects.
Okay.
The first one is kind of on a similar theme in terms of use. We had appropriated dollars in 2 years for basic needs through the Branford Counseling Center. And so some of that money has not been fully expended. And so you may recall probably, I think 2 meetings ago, you received a letter as correspondence from Branford Interfaith Housing. Same meeting that when the Legion presented. The following meeting, the Legion dollars were approved, and we said we were working on another avenue for trying to address the brick situation. And so in meeting with the counseling center and going over some of their balances, the thought was to make a contribution to to the Branford Interfaith Housing Organization. You may recall in that letter, they talked about some of the things that were lacking because of, lost rental income during the pandemic. But Peter Semino's here, and he can sort of give you an overview as well. So.
You did a great job.
Welcome, Peter.
Joe. Ladies, gentlemen.
So the 40,000 will be, will go into the fund for specific.
Yeah, the way this operates, Joe, is the operating expenses come from the rent. And what's happened, especially with COVID, there's a lot of tenants there. Some are on fixed income, some are Alice families. So when COVID came in there, some of them lost their jobs, so they weren't able to pay the rents as they should have. The management company who had at that time really didn't pursue it or didn't give them any avenues, because the state was offering different help. So it fell behind on getting the income in that we needed to do the necessary operation, repairs and stuff like that. The management company we had, we let them go because they really weren't following through on a lot of the things we wanted to do. Especially we have these RAP certificates. What they needed to do every 5 years is to go to the state and say, okay, we need an increase. Because everything increased. They never did that. So we got a new management company, and actually we're starting to pick up where the other company failed. But for us to catch up there, it's taken us some time, and we'd like to, and things are challenging because things are starting to fall apart. This project's been around for, I think it incorporated in 1988. So it's one of the longest affordable housing sites in town.
Isn't it North Ivy Street?
North Ivy Street, yeah. So if we can get some help with that, that'll help us take care of some things that weren't taken care of when we had the other management company in there.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Questions?
Peter, what is the management company that you're using now?
Dow Realty. Jeff Dow's. He's, I think people know Jeff. He's young and full of energy and is willing to take this on, which is great because we needed somebody to be more proactive, especially when you're dealing with different aspects of the state. And he's able to do that, and he's having a good interface with the tenants, which is good because some people think they don't have to pay their rent, and he'll go over there and work out deals and make sure that we're getting the rent that we need. Nobody's ever been evicted there. Not that we want people to be evicted, but we have to make sure they understand that, like everybody else, you need to pay your rent so you can maintain some kind of lifestyle there.
What's the occupancy, total occupancy up there?
We got 29 units, and right now we only have 2 that are vacant, one's pending, and one I think is still in repair. We had a couple fires there. So they've been, there was 3 fires, I think, over the course of the past 2 years. Okay. And I think there's one that still has to be finished with the repairs. So we're pretty close.
Budget?
I'm sorry?
What's the overall budget up there?
With the rents, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't have the number in front of me. It was around $30,000, $40,000 that we get the rents from the tenants. I'm not sure what the expenses are, Joe.
Yeah,
I don't have that in front of me. Yeah.
Amount, so the 40,000 is a substantial number compared to the annual budget up there.
It's going to help us. It's up there, but it's going to help us catch up on a lot of the projects that we can't do there.
Okay, so it'll be, even though it was for rent, to subsidize revenue that didn't come in, you're going to be using this for capital items as well?
Yeah, because if we had all that income coming in during that time, we would have been staying on top of that. Whether it be the repairs of the road, there's some electrical repairs that we have to do, and internally we have to make sure that the units are up to at least some of the ADA codes, because some people there are handicapped.
Thanks, Peter. Other questions? So anyone want to move
I'll
this?
move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
A second?
second by Pam. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck. Next, Public Works. Public Works looking to reallocate balances in street lighting and allocation of unexpended funds. Purchase a roll-off trailer that would be funded mobile diesel generator and lawn equipment. Gary? So this is saying you're going to buy a roll-off trailer in addition to a...
No.
No, Joe, the roll-off trailer was purchased,
Okay.
and so there was a balance of about $16,100 on the roll-off that was
it's coming
already
out.
approved, and then the $109,043 was for street lighting.
Okay. Got it. So we're reallocating these basically to the equipment so you can buy the diesel generator and lawn equipment.
Yeah, correct. The generator would be, it's a portable generator, but it would be mainly to power our Public Works facility. We're in need of one.
What size generator?
Off the top of my head, I don't have all the...
It's a 75
particulars.
kVA.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Jim.
You owe one now.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Questions from Gary on this? Gary, you want to move that?
I'll move it. I'll second it.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
You're all set, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Recreation.
Okay, this one is, was in the capital plan, and where we were looking at $25,000, which the town appropriated in tax dollars, is then the Recreation Department was anticipating a grant from the state of $175,000. They were informed recently that that wasn't going to happen, and so, fortunately, the engineering department got a grant for the Branford Point Pier, and the project was also under budget. So you'll see that project, the Branford Point Wharf replacement, is being reallocated for a couple projects, but in this case, it really substitutes for the state grant that was anticipated, but unfortunately is not forthcoming. So this basically replaces ARPA with for what we thought was going to be state money.
Jim, do we know why we didn't get that grant?
I can't give you an official answer as to why that is. I mean, it's from what I heard, and again, Alex is probably a better source than I am, is that I think the governor wasn't anxious to be funding playgrounds, and so I think so this stuff wasn't making any bond commission agendas or anything, or wasn't getting approved to even get on the agenda. So, but Alex Alex was in direct conversation with our state reps. I was not. Alex was communicating with them, and Alex was communicating with us. So is that a fair representation?
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. So I mean,
Thank you.
Okay. other
This for
que-
repairs for the lighting up there?
no, this is actually this was actually the playground that he presented in the budget process.
Okay. I'll move it.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
seconded by Deborah. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The Finance Department?
Okay. You may recall at the during the budget process, we were looking at one time to do basically roughly this amount for a pension system. We pulled it off because we hadn't had a chance to see a demo of it. We did recently, this past week, we were able to look at it, and I think when you go long-term in terms of the town and its pension, a couple things that have evolved over the years. One is, we went back to the defined benefit plan. So that basically signals that the town's going to be in the pension business for the long haul. you have two different tiers of the plan, and one of the other pension changes that occurred some years back is that we allow for what's called alternate payees, which the plan didn't allow before. Alternate payee, an example would be somebody gets divorced, and so you have the officer and the alternate payee, and so we find ourselves basically opining on administering what they call a quadro, qualified domestic relations orders. So that's typically when the court allocates pensions, and so the pension world is getting a little bit more complicated, and also I think in terms of like succession planning, I think it's good to have these documents, all of these things online in the cloud with an organization that's providing a lot of the back office support for this. So they would basically be doing calculations, because right now I do the calculations. They'd be looking at the qualified domestic relations orders. There's also a self-service aspect to this, where when fully implemented, an officer would be able to create his account online and then be able to, with all certain caveats, be able to estimate their own pension. Now obviously it's a little bit different than the final calculation, similar to like with the state plan. You can go on and use the state calculator, but you acknowledge that this isn't your real retirement number, although they should be very close. One of the features, though, is that it would actually incorporate information from HR's payroll system, the ADP system, so to be able to do stuff with calculating, the pension earnings, and also they would provide like a service center, if we were to opt for that, where a pensioner could actually call, and they could change their, their address, their bank account, and things like that. So it has a variety of features. We called a couple towns that were used as a reference, and one of the communities that really utilizes it and was very happy with it. I mean, and both communities were happy with it, but the one where I got the most information from, because the person seemed to really have a good grasp of the product, was Danbury. Now, obviously, Danbury's bigger than we are, and so Danbury would pay more for this than the town does. And, we basically have, if you count like police people collecting a pension and people who are eligible for a pension and, terminated invested employees, on the police side, it's probably about 109, bodies. And then on the volunteer fire, we have 16 people that are in pay status. But the volunteer is a little bit tricky because the way folks kind of qualify for that, we have a lot of records on people, but not as somebody could have like say 6 years, and that was from 10 years ago, and they're not active. We still have them kind of in our system. So so this would actually provide really sort of an enhanced back office. I mean, there are some concerns with myself, Catherine, and Irene and staff looked at. I mean, I think the transition might be a little bit harder, because I think some of the older pensioners, was pointed out, may be less likely to want to call an 800 number, because they would call us. And obviously, as a fail-safe, they could still call us. I mean, we'd probably try to, nudge them to the service. But I think for the newer employees and looking forward, I think they would pretty much embrace the technology. It provides backup. All our current files would be scanned and be available, which. You know how it is, right, Joe? The pension file. So, and some of the information is stored on a network on my PC.
Right.
I mean, it's backed up on the
Just to
network.
put everything into one system.
But you start trying to do that. Now, I anticipate you will ask, is this going to be an ongoing expense? And the answer is yes. But this would be considered a, eligible expense of the pension fund. So I think going forward, well, what we would do is pay for this, out of the pension fund like we do custodial services, et cetera. Now, all things being...
This is an annual expense, this amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, all things being
A
equal, though,
subscription type of service.
yeah, we would basically, that all things being equal, our contribution would go up by the annual fee here. But again, I think we've talked about it as a board, and when we've talked about some of the long-range strategies, one of the things we've also talked about is looking at ways to even improve the pension funding. As Mike Moore, who was here earlier, pointed out, we've done a really good job on the OPEB and funding that, and then some pension assumptions broke our way. But I do think that this is something that we could incorporate if it's something to be improved. It is another project for the finance department, so. But it's something that it's probably a good thing to get done, for the future.
Okay, question. I think it's good, Jim. Question?
Is this, that you said this is the annual fee, the 38,000? Is it annual? Oh. And would we monitor it, though, to make sure that we had good usage? Like people were going on it and you'd get...
Well, we could certainly. The other thing is if this gets approved by this board and the RTM, what I had contemplated doing is just reaching out to some of the union leaders of the police pension and say, this is what we're looking at, this is going to help you. Because, the police officers have been very patient. Lots of times they'll say, hey, I'm thinking of retiring next year. Can you run my numbers? And I excuse me, I get their payroll information from HR, then I run the numbers in a spreadsheet, and then they give them an estimate. But there's other aspects of this. It's like depending on when they were hired. They also have might have spousal reduction. So there's things like that. I think that it will probably get used, when we start seeing a lot of officers start to retire. So if we had this in place currently, I think you will see it in the next year, because I think a lot of officers were waiting to the new contract. And my understanding is the RTM did you guys vote on police? You did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the RTM recently voted on the police contract. So I think that, within a year of that, because they want the wages, right, to count towards their pension, you'll see more activity, and I'll be getting a lot of requests for that. But yeah, we could certainly monitor the usage, and it's kind of priced in a way to kind of reflect our current usage. How many people retire and et cetera. So.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah. I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff.
Second.
Seconded by Harry. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Next, Police Department, request supplements the Police Department's upcoming transfer request to purchase additional license plate readers.
Yeah, I thought that the Police Department probably at your next meeting is going to have a request to reallocate some capital for license plate readers. And when we were talking as a town team about ARPA, we'd have at the staff meetings, probably from the summer on, we were kind of warning about the ARPA deadlines. And I said to folks, I said, if you have something that you think you can put to use, that certainly has an impact on the ability of the department to perform services. And license plate readers are one of the tools that law enforcement uses. They're actually going to purchase one through a capital transfer, and this would allow them to do two other readers. And then they'd be working with a vendor to nail down the location. So essentially, it's somewhat straightforward, but again, it's sort of using high tech to kind of help them basically, do their law enforcement duties.
And what's the story on the boardwalk?
Basically, the boardwalk, the other aspect of that department head meeting was talking with the departments and saying, okay, are you able to complete this project? And some of them are actually under budget. So the boardwalk, I had received an email probably about 3 weeks ago from the town engineer saying that he can basically give that up.
Project's still moving forward, not canceled. He just has excess funds available in that original ARPA appropriation.
Okay, thanks. Questions on this?
Move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
second by Pam. Discussion. All in favor? Next is executive, 1690.
Yeah. So when about a year and a half ago, when we were talking about allocating money that would be funneled but through the Branford Community Foundation, we basically came up with the $425,000. The internal workings of that was we were estimating $30,000 for the Community Foundation and $395,000 to the nonprofits. It ended up costing us a little bit more with the Community Foundation. Obviously, still helped us out tremendously, so certainly wouldn't begrudge them the 1690, but just to kind of clean things up. So we would basically be increasing that project by $1,690 to cover the administrative cost.
Questions?
Move it.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
second by Deborah. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Future allocations, reallocation.
Okay. Okay, so this is where we sort of diverge from our practice, but more so out of necessity. So when the town was first alerted that it was going to receive the $8.2 million in ARPA funds, Branford and a number of communities were trying to discern, how they would administer the funds, how they would allocate them, and they were done in a variety of different ways. In Branford, my recommendation at the time was to essentially mirror the budget process. Now, what were the reasons for mirroring the budget process? One, the budget process is conducted in a public forum. Two, the projects we were funding were projects presented during the budget process. So, they were approved by commissions, they were approved by the Board of Finance, and later the RTM. They were done at televised meetings, etc. And it was a good way to help us program some of these improvements because we were basically linking it to, but not supplanting, but linking it to our capital plans. Well, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we're winding down now. So these dollars, the $8.2 million, have to either be spent by December 31st, 2024, or they have to be obligated through like a contract or a purchase order. And that has put pressure on us to kind of use up the dollars that we have. So at tonight's meeting, as I said at the beginning, we're doing basically three things. The first one was, okay, of the $71,000 and change left, let's appropriate that. Let's appropriate them to things we could get out the door, painting, laptops, those type of projects. And the other was, well, what do we have in balances that we could transfer to also meet other projects? And that was the second part of this agenda. what it leaves is that, okay, so we still have a number of ongoing ARPA projects, and a lot of them, have balances. So if we looked at it in total, we basically have about 128,000 in an unspent balance for ARPA projects. Now, some of them are concentrated in two projects. One is 45,000 and one is 35,000, and we anticipate we'll make some headwinds into spending that. So let's just take the 128 and let's just say we take 70 off that. At the end of the day, we're talking about less than $60,000 of stuff that we would be allocating, which is a very, very small percentage of the overall 8.2 million. And so the thought is, well, how are we going to do this? We're not going to be creating new projects in January because we're supposed to spend the money in December, right? So the thinking is that if you go back to our original declaration with ARPA, we chose the standard allowance. The standard allowance was for any community that got less than $10 million. So we got the 8.2 and change, we were less than 10 million. We got to be able to use that money. One is to claim revenue loss, and then use that money for what was called government services. And the description of government services, as I've always maintained over the years, was strikingly similar to how the general fund budget is constructed. So the thinking is, well, okay, what would be some good criteria to allocate, let's call it the $58,000-$60,000? And one is, well, we should use it for government services because it's consistent with the guidelines. Two is we should use it for things that have already been approved by the Board of Finance and the RTM, if not in the ARPA fund, in another fund. So primarily, say, the general fund. All right? Because we have to make sure that whatever we do is it was expended before December 31st, 2024. In other words, that invoice has to be, before that. So the thought is that, expenditures that are occurring now could be used to fulfill that $58,000 to $60,000 left. I gave an example of, for example, let's say the recent election we had. We had a lot of folks working the polls. We had early voting, and then the election itself, and then you had various checks and other things after the election, etc. And so we know that those costs were incurred before December 31st. And we know to the extent that the general fund budget may be insufficient to cover these costs, we can move those expenses against the ARPA allocation. So we're not actually adjusting budgets per se, we're actually moving expenses. So we're not dealing with appropriations, we're moving expenses. And we're somewhat limited in terms of our time frame because there's kind of two looming deadlines additionally. One is we file a report for March 30th. So we want to get March 30th, 2025, so we want to get a lot of those in there. And then closing fiscal year 25, because the 24 by December will be in fiscal year 25. So that's kind of our last bite at this apple. And admittedly, if we had a very, very large project that came in under budget, let's just say you had a contract for $100,000 and only spent $90,000, we would lose that $10,000 because that would have been a long project and it would have been after the close of the fiscal year. So I realize there's a lot of pieces to this, but essentially that's the concept. And so, I didn't want to do this in a vacuum, both myself and the first selectman. We realized that ARPA and grants aren't subject to the same type of rules that the budget process is, because the budget process is very clear. Board of Finance is making recommendations on RTM, RTM's approving the budget, Board of Finance controls revenue, RTM expenditures, and all that is used to set a tax rate, and it's all laid out within our code. ARPA, again, or grants typically aren't subject to that, But we actually basically, by our own rules, mirrored that process. So the thought is, by our own rules, we could amend something we created, in theory, right? And so that was, that is the thinking, and so as to not do this in a vacuum, it's in the memo.
Yeah, that's good, Jim.
Yeah.
My thinking on this is that it's really part of the closeout process. So, and I think that it's been, we've had clear transparency from day one on the ARPA funding, and as Jim pointed out, with our discussion early several years ago was to have that as much transparency as possible and to follow that appropriation process. I think at this point in time, because of the timing, again, and there's full transparency on this, and there will be, that this is essentially a closeout process. We need to get it done so we don't lose funds.
Right.
So my suggestion is that we consider an appropriation, consider a resolution to approve the closeout process for ARPA funds as presented by the first selectman and finance director.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Jamie, do you have any comments on this?
No, I just appreciate the board's time on this, and as we close this out and all the work that Jim and Catherine, the finance department as a whole, has put into managing this program. We are at the end. I do think this was, we did lay out a process that, not only the appropriating bodies, Board of Finance and the RTM, were familiar with, but really the community. We wanted to be transparent as possible. And we're really talking about not only are these a small portion of our ARPA dollars, but I think it's also important to note, as Jim has laid out, we would utilize these residual balances to cover things that were already part of government services, right? So these aren't new things. These are just addressing expenses that were not contemplated in the general.
Journalizing between
Yes,
where it's being paid.
Right,
Right.
journalizing. And the other thing, too, is I should have mentioned in the letter, is that, when at the conclusion of this process, I'm going to send out a memo with a spreadsheet attached, so you'll see where it got journalized to as will the RTM. So.
Thank you, Jim. Questions from the board? Additional questions? Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, item number 10 is to consider and if appropriate clear a capital projects closeout transfer request from the finance director.
We're going to
Catherine?
give Jim a little break. So per the ordinance, the capital ordinance, we're required to come before the Board of Finance and RTM to either extend projects or close those projects out, those capital projects that the funds are no longer needed, thereby closing them to the fund that funded them.
Sure.
The source of funds. So we broke this out by RTM committee just to make it a little bit easier for the RTM. I'm not sure if you would like me to go through every project.
I think that if you provide the highlights, I think we have the project.
Okay, perfect. I think the larger items that would probably be wise to talk about would be in the public services area.
Okay, why don't we hit the administrative, we'll go through this one so that, why don't I hit on them and then you could comment.
Yep,
on
perfect.
that. So for the administrative services, we have capital funds. We're going to close out a small IT project for $376. It's actually going to be transferred to the general fund. So $376.85. Public services, you have various projects that are going to be, for a total of $206,000, that are going to be extended, which basically creates new projects.
In the event that there's no current project for it. So if there's a current project, we assigned it that project number. So for example, in the GGB vehicles,
Yep.
we're going to transfer that money. It's going to be combined with the transfer for the DPW apparatus fund.
Okay.
Because that's where most vehicles get funded out of
Got
for
it.
the town fleet.
Got it.
But the others, yes, will have new projects associated with them.
Okay. Right, even though they're the same dollars, they're just into a new project
Exactly.
because we're following the procedure. So that, in this case, we're extending the town clerk vault for $112,000, the GIS database for $776, the town center decorative lights for $20,000, and parking lot paving is $66,000. So those will all be just continued, let's say, in new projects. Okay. And then you're going to close out the pavement survey for $2,092, and that's going to go back to the general fund.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's under the Public Services Fund 700 Capital Fund. And then you've got the Fund 720 Municipal Facilities, and all of those are being asked to be, requested to be extended in like form. Front steps for the town hall of $13,020. A generator install for $73,000. And transfer station improvements for $121,952, for a total of $208,000. So those will be continued.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And then we go to rules and ordinances, again, Fund 700. There will be an extension of the natural resource inventory for $2,450. Under Ways and Means, again, Capital Fund 700. They will actually create a new project from two finance projects for a total of $13,425, which will be called system upgrades and projects, and that's basically IT based.
More our office, with our upgrades for Munis, new modules that are being added, the pension system. A lot of times we need money for training, for other items that we might need to purchase.
Okay. So that's under Ways and Means, and then we have Education Committee, again, it's Fund 700. We have the projects that were for the high school security and the Indian Neck security of $121,000. Those would be extended and the scope amended into new projects for the entrance at the high school for $19,898, and for Indian Neck campus with some security upgrades of $101,185. And there was a letter from Superintendent and the COO with regards to the details about Indian Neck, in particular about the parking, the security and the parking configuration and that sort of thing, which I think is a good explanation for that. So that would be morph into the $121,083 for those two projects. And then for the UST, the underground tank removal, closeout of that project for $3,316, and that would be transferred to the general fund. So that covers all of the items, correct, Catherine?
Yes.
Are there questions from Catherine on this or anybody else? Thank you for that help on this. Somebody want to move these transfer requests?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item 11, which is to consider if appropriate approve the 2025 meeting schedule that Lisa put together for us. Thank you. Any comments on that, Lisa?
No, I have no comments.
Okay, I see St. Patrick's Day, we have a
first
meeting on
first
St.
budget
Patrick's
meeting,
Day. Okay. That's fine. I know Pam would have asked that question. So,
Thank you for catching that, I didn't see
I'll
that.
make sure I call the fire chief, police chief to meet with them on that day.
okay. Okay.
They've asked for an exemption every year if we do it.
I'll entertain a motion to accept that schedule if so
I'll move
appropriate.
it. I'll move it.
Moved by Pam, second by Jeff. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Before we go to item number 12, I just didn't know if, Jamie, you have anything else you'd like to cover tonight?
No, okay.
You're all set?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, a question to
Sure.
the selectman. Jamie, since we've all received our new assessments in the mail, would you or Jim explain to the public, because I know most of the town listens to our program here, but, maybe we can put a memo into our town news and in terms of the process.
Sure.
It's unfortunate that people go all over the place. I mean, I'm not a Facebook, Twitter, or X, but I understand from people that tell me, and then I have to tell them, no, it's not that way. Who thinks it's retroactive, this, that, and the other? So I think.
Yeah, actually,
From the first
thanks.
selectman or the director.
Right. Well, I'll just first add to that, Harry, is that, I think it's important to note, we have been not only discussing the reval that we knew was coming, but I think it was also at his meeting, Board of Finance, I believe it was mentioned even at some RTM meetings, that, this was coming. And we were all monitoring what was happening with the market and what that would do with values. And I think Finance Director, and I'll let him speak more in depth about it if he'd like to, even provided a letter last spring regarding the potential impact and that may occur with the reval, given the current market. As oftentimes with the reval, the shift occurs. We've seen what's been happening with residential property values for the last couple of years, not only here in Branford, but throughout the state of Connecticut and beyond. But certainly, that we would see a shift happen. I think what's important to note for the residents is we're getting their notice of assessment. That is an assessment based on the value of their property. And there is a process to follow in terms of, the first process, that was a letter from the consultant or the vendor that provides the appraisal services, vision appraisal, and this is the first phase. You can go, and if there's a challenge to that value that they determine, you can go through that process. And then from there, as you know, there's the Board of Assessment Appeals that will take place in February. But again, I just want to remind everybody that this assessment is not a tax bill. This is one part of it. This is determining the value of the overall grand list and property values in particular. There's no impact on your January 1. I've had a few residents reach out and express concern that it affects their current tax bill. It does not affect their current tax bill. That's due January 1. This is establishing the value of our overall grand list, which will be used when we set the mill rate for fiscal year 26, which will take place through the process of the Board of Finance and the RTM, beginning in March and through April and May, with the mill rate being set in May. So where there are some pretty significant increases percentage-wise, do not equate that percentage increase to a tax increase, because as Finance Director provided a letter to the board. Was that last April, Jim?
Yes, yep.
Last April, and ran through a scenario where, the percentage of assessment value does not necessarily equate to a percentage of tax increase.
Thanks,
And
Gene.
I just want to also, as we do every year, and this year will be no different, and actually we're cognizant of this potential. So, we're fortunate enough to be in a position where we can, pull different levers to kind of mitigate that impact, to smooth that out. And that has been a strength of this town, primarily due to the finance director and this board, to try to mitigate that impact and smooth that out over the years. We kept ourselves in a strong, financial position where there's been pressure in the past with fund balance and drawing that down. And we were very clear over the years that, a day will come where we want to have that flexibility to truly provide some kind of relief moving forward, to phase in something that may occur, to smooth out the impact, whether we've exercised it back in 2017 when the state we were looking at a total reduction of potentially of state funds, to now I think we'll follow a similar strategy when we look at kind of the impact of this reval.
Thanks. Thank you, Jamie. And before, I would like Jim to make some brief comments, because I know your voice is
We're concerned about you.
Yeah, we're concerned about you, but I do want to mention a couple of things. One is that Trista did put out a good memo on Friday that again recapped the fact that it is this is the assessment process, the reval process. This does not equate to tax bills or impact on direct impact on taxes. Secondly, that we did have quite a bit of discussion about the reval and the impact not only for future years, but what happened historically and what might be anticipated. And in that, during our budget process, and Jim did put together a good analysis on April 24th, which we sent, and others, a lot of detail with regards to what might happen for a particular neighborhoods and such. And again, knowing that in fact there was going to be an impact on the residential side, and we had, back then it was close to 45% that we thought might shift or increase, and that would equate to some type of shift to the residential side. So again, Jim, if you'd like to hit on the high note on this.
Jim, before I just want to follow up on your comment regarding the letter the information that was provided that you just referenced, Joe, just for the public's benefit, those who are watching. Not only can you find that on our town Facebook page, Town of Branford's Facebook page, but also if you go to the town website on the assessor's page, a lot of that information would be provided. So thanks for reminding us. Thanks.
Jim?
Yeah, I will keep it brief, but essentially this past year and a half, the town has been considering many things. There was a focus on improving public safety. We had the 16 EMTs. There was discussion of adding 8 firefighters. There's talk related to the fire plan. There was talk related to adding 2 police officers, and there was discussion regarding the police contract, which includes a more modern schedule. All of those things we knew would cost money. And so when we did our long-range planning, we wanted to make sure that we also looked at, well, there is also going to be a reval. We didn't want to be, dismissive of that, and we didn't want to ignore it. And so that's why back in April, before the budget was finally adopted, we did discuss potential impacts of a reval without having any data. It was more or less somewhat deterministic, as Joe mentioned, with the 45%. And as Jamie mentioned, we do have a lot of levers. I think it was also important to have these discussions while we were also looking at draft debt and fund balance policies. So it's all related. It's going to be an interesting year. I mean, we do have some challenges, but we're not the only community that has challenges. Many other communities are going through a reval as well, and others have. This is not the first revaluation that the town has been through. There have been some others that have also had a shift. But I think that, you know, if we stick to kind of our methods in terms of our practices and, you know, following our budget process and adhering to some of the budget guidelines we've established in the past, investing in future equipment, funding our liabilities, and using some of our residual balances to address certain things and position the town better off long term, and look for ways to push this where we can. We can't make it go away entirely, but you know, we're certainly do what we can within reason. So,
thank you, Jim. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Harry, for bringing that up. With no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move it.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.